ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor to introduce the Honorable Greg Goodnight, Mayor of the City of Kokomo.
Thank you. Council President Hayes, members of the Kokomo Common Council, elected officials, distinguished guests, and citizens of Kokomo, welcome. I would especially like to welcome my wife Kelly and my family and friends who took the time to be here this evening. As always, I extend my sincere and humble thanks to the people of Kokomo for placing their faith in me and giving me the opportunity to serve as mayor of this great city. For the past few years, I've begun this annual address by talking about our city's financial situation. And in 2014, as in previous years, we have managed to achieve great things while staying fiscally responsible and under budget. In fact, we underspent our 2014 budget by 8%, or $5.2 million. This accomplishment is all the more remarkable when you consider that we also undertook 3 major capital campaigns in the year 2014. We completed the renovation of this very building, made a $1 million donation to the new YMCA building fund, and paid off the $9 million parking garage 5 years early. We've done this while continuing to improve our trails, to expand our public transportation system, to maintain our roads and sidewalks, to attract new businesses, and help our current businesses expand. We are also continuing to eliminate blight and making improvements in our neighborhoods. And while many communities continue to shift more and more of the financial burden on their citizens, we've done all of this without assessing new taxes, without raising sewer fees, and without instituting any new service fees. We as a community are accomplishing great things, and people are taking notice. Other cities across the state and nation are turning to us to learn more about our services, our programs, our way of doing things. Later this year, Kokomo will host both the Indiana Statewide Preservation Conference and the Indiana Conference of Mayors. They want to hear our story, the story of our community. They see us as an example of great municipal government. They see us as a place that's attracting new residents, new investment, and new development. They see us as a model city. And it's no wonder when you consider all that has happened in just a few short years. Consider some of what we accomplished in 2014 alone. Chrysler, again, showed us its extraordinary commitment to growing in our community by announcing plans to invest an additional $266 million in new manufacturing equipment. This investment will allow Chrysler to expand production of its 8-speed transmission, helping them to respond to the ever-changing landscape of the American automotive industry. Meanwhile, Cohen Engineering announced a $1.4 million investment in its Kokomo facility, allowing the company to expand and hire 10 additional skilled full-time employees. Longtime Kokomo business Shear Printing and Office Solutions invested more than $500,000 in expanding their Kokomo operation. Posterific Italian Restaurant invested $2 million in its new 12,000 square foot Bel Air Event Center. Outside companies are also recognizing the value of Kokomo's local economy. LA Auto Gear expanded its operations by establishing a presence in the Midwest, bringing new life to a previously vacant 10,000 square foot building. And this spring, onshoring company Nexient will relocate to the historic Firestone building in the heart of Kokomo and increase its employee ranks to 240. It's no surprise that Kokomo was ranked 3rd in the nation for job growth from 2013 to 2014. And that's according to the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. At the same time, our unemployment rate decreased by more than 2 percentage points, and our labor force increased by more than 1,800 workers. 2014 also saw the near completion of our new parking garage, as well as groundbreaking and ongoing construction on our new $16 million YMCA facility, and completion of the residence at Washington Street, a $9 million private investment 4-story apartment complex. And we're still going strong. The NRP Group announced plans for a $10.2 million housing project on the north side of Kokomo, providing 70 new housing units And JCF Real Estate will very soon be building a residential community on the west side of Kokomo, redeveloping a currently blighted area while building 44 duplexes. But to truly understand how far we've come, we must go back even further. I delivered my first State of the City address in February 2008, just a few short weeks after taking office. Imagine if I had told you during that speech of all the things we would accomplish between then and now. That we would build the Kokomo Arts Pavilion, and that it would bring tens of thousands of visitors to Foster Park each year for more than a dozen free public events. And that we would establish the City Line service, our community's first fixed route bus system in decades, and that this service would be completely free of charge to users, and that ridership would shatter all expectations and continue to rise year after year. And imagine in that speech if I had told you that we would see a 24% reduction in major crime between 2008 and now, that we would add nearly 5 miles of new trails and more than 24 miles of new bike lanes and bike routes to our community, and build 2 new dog parks. The downtown Kokomo, including the historic Depot District, will become known once again as a bustling commercial area and a center for restaurants and retail. Imagine if I had said that we would be named Community of the Year by the Indiana Chamber of Commerce and received the Community Achievement Award from the Indiana Association of Cities and Towns twice. And that we would complete the city of Kokomo's first major annexation in more than 30 years, presenting a more accurate portrait of our community by bringing in deep-rooted parts of our urban region. By that point in my speech, there would have been a lot of strange looks and maybe even some nervous laughter. But what if I had kept going? If I had told you that in just a few short years, Kokomo would have a new 4-story parking garage with 35 apartment units on the 5th and 6th floors, and that we would break ground on that new $16 million YMCA in the heart of Kokomo, and that a new baseball stadium would be under construction just across the Wildcat Creek, and that a private developer would build new apartments on the south side of Kokomo, specifically to serve Indiana University Kokomo residents and students, and that Kokomo schools would establish an international school housing foreign exchange students right here in Kokomo, that Ivy Tech would establish a presence in the former Armstrong Landon building, one of our city's largest, most prominent landmarks, and that Chrysler would invest more than $1.8 billion in its Kokomo facilities, and that at a time when across our state and nation, jobs continue to go overseas and plants continue to close, we would reverse that trend by working with Patriot Porcelain to reopen the pottery facility on Kokomo's north side. Imagine if I had told you back in February 2008 that all of these things would happen, every single one of them and more. And on top of that, imagine if I told you that all these things would happen in the wake of the greatest economic recession to hit our city, state, and nation since the 1930s, during a time when we were faced with high unemployment and a shrinking budget, at a time when many of our largest employers were in a state of crisis and it was uncertain whether they would continue their operations in Kokomo, much less expand. Let's be honest, if I had said all this back in that first State of the City address, I would have been laughed out of the room. Most of you would have seen me as a wild-eyed dreamer in need of a rude awakening and a lesson on what we can actually realistically accomplish. 7 years ago, there were people who thought that converting our downtown streets to two-way traffic was a wildly unrealistic idea. There were people who criticized us when we took out traffic lights and parking meters. There were people who thought we were wrong to get rid of those tasteless yellow signs that littered our streets, or that we shouldn't have worked to reduce our ridiculous number of billboards. Compared to that, talk of housing developments, parking garages, and a new YMCA would have been unthinkable. Absolutely unthinkable. Thankfully, not all of us agreed. Thankfully, our community was also filled with women and men who were willing to not only dream big, but to act big. The last several years have been a difficult time for our city, our county, and our state. In the wake of that Great Recession, there were a lot of late nights and plenty of discussion and debate. When faced with such adversity, we could very easily have made the wrong decisions, or worse yet, we could have made no decisions at all. We could have done nothing and simply allowed our community to wither away slowly, as so many other communities have throughout the years. We could have gone into caretaker mode, patching over our problems just enough to get by. We could have admitted defeat by slashing services and raising user fees instead of continuing the vital services our residents have come to expect. All of those choices would have represented a retreat, a step backwards to our community. But as N.P. Young reminded us back in 1978, bad news is just an excuse. So we didn't go backwards and we didn't stand still, we went forward. I think this is a good time to stop for a moment and recognize the women and men on this city council. At the beginning of my administration, I asked that we put politics aside for now and work together for the good of our community, and we all did. Our city council knew that it was not the time for political games or short-term thinking. Our city council knew that we had to be bold, we had to take risks, and we had to lead. Now we're in an election year, and I want to say that I truly believe each and every one of you has earned your place here on this council. You earned it through your integrity, and through your leadership. I've said it before and I will say it again, Kokomo has the best city council in the state. On behalf of our entire city, thank you. But with all this talk of leadership, of taking risks, of bold actions, some of you might be wondering, was it really necessary? My answer probably won't surprise you. Yes, it was necessary. The very future of our community depended on it, and it still does. Indiana University's Public Policy Institute recently issued a report which did an excellent job of summing up the crucial challenge facing Kokomo and similar communities across the state and nation. This report states that between the years 2000 and 2010, 90% of Indiana's population growth came from just 13 counties. Stop and think about that. 90% of Indiana's population growth came from just 13 of our 92 counties. This trend will continue, and it will accelerate. The study stated that this uneven population growth will be compounded by an overall aging of Indiana's population, meaning that by the 2020 census, our growth will be concentrated in even fewer counties, nearly all of them mid-sized and urban counties. That's why the decisions we make in the next 3 to 5 years will be critical. Indiana University history professor James Madison referred recently to two Indianas, one mired in the 1970s, the other focused on building a model for the 21st century. One fading away through negligence and indecision, the other working to build wealth, strengthen neighborhoods, and improve quality of life. One Indiana dying, the other Indiana prospering. The difference, Dr. Madison said, is that in winning communities, people led. They built, they invested in a community that was more than a place name on a map. Granted, some of a community's investment is made at the state and federal level and is out of local control, which is why I must take a moment here to discuss a disturbing new proposal, one that would alter the state's funding formula for K-12 education. These changes would slightly increase K-12 spending across the whole state. But this increase would not be proportional. Instead, it would disproportionately help some school districts at the expense of others. Here in Howard County, our Taylor Titans would see a decrease of 3.8% overall funding, and our Kokomo Wildcats would be flatlined. Meanwhile, wealthier suburban school districts in other counties would see an average increase of nearly 5%. I am proud of the quality schools in the Kokomo area and the work our teachers are doing. However, maintaining this quality depends on continued investment at the state level. I call on our elected leaders to create equitable funding that proportionally helps all districts, including those right here in Howard County. However, while continuing to fight for fair treatment at the state and federal level, we must also remember that our destiny is determined by us. There will be winners and losers, and those winners will be determined by which communities are able to attract new residents. Ball State economist Michael Hicks recently wrote that today's workers look for good local schools, safe, quiet neighborhoods, availability of recreation and the like. Great places are the only ones that are growing. And make no mistake, just holding on to our current residents is not enough. When we make decisions, we must think about our current residents, but we must also think about our future residents, those who do not live here yet. Think about this. Chrysler works hard to keep its customers happy, to make sure that Chrysler owners remain Chrysler owners. But at the same time, they also focus on the future. They design, build, and market products not just for the Chrysler owners of today, but for tomorrow as well. They're constantly working to win over Toyota owners, and Honda owners, and Ford owners. In the same way, we must work to market our community to the residents of today and tomorrow. We must work to market to those who work in Kokomo but choose to live elsewhere, to those looking for a place to retire, to those just now entering the job market, and those who won't enter the job market for years to come. That's why everything we do, everything, from economic development to blight removal, to infrastructure, to parks and recreation, to public transit, must be aimed at making Kokomo a great place to live. That's why we must recognize the importance of investing in trails and parks, in public transportation, in housing and neighborhood development, all aimed at attracting new residents and keeping the ones we have. It's why we must focus on bold and innovative initiatives at a time when so many would prefer us to maintain the status quo, to keep on doing what we had always done. Our recent success was not inevitable. The choices we made may seem obvious in retrospect, but as we know, they were often controversial. We were opposed by those who feared change, who were comfortable with the status quo. But even worse, we were also opposed by those who benefited from the status quo, those who placed their own personal short-term interest above the long-term good of our community. As Winston Churchill said, "You will never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks." Like every community, Kokomo has a couple of barking dogs, and the more things change, the louder they get. But this is not the time to let our foot off the gas. This is not a time to apply the brakes, and this is definitely not the time to throw the car in reverse. We must keep moving forward towards our destination. Think about how much this city has transformed over the last 4 or 5 years. Think about what the next 10 may bring. But our progress wasn't inevitable before, and it won't be inevitable now. As I've said before from this very podium, by working together, we have managed to overcome great adversity, and now we must continue to work together to manage success. That is even more true now than it was back then. Today, some of our greatest challenges come from outside forces, come not from our outside forces, but from our very selves. But you know what? We're Kokomo. I grew up here. I've lived here my entire life, so I know what that means. We've faced down adversity time and time again, and we've survived. We've weathered economic recessions, but we've made it through. We've made it through the bad times, through layoffs and plant closings, through floods and tornadoes and blizzards. We're still here. We're still thriving because we stood together, because we worked together, because we refused to let anything diminish or divide us. Because we're Kokomo, and nobody does it like us. But now we have the opportunity to manage success. We have the opportunity to be a winning community, to build a foundation for success for years and decades to come. It won't be easy, but I truly believe that we can do it. We were not divided during the hard times, and we cannot be divided during the good. By standing together, we build ourselves into a model city for our state and nation, a place where people truly want to live. Let's take a moment to be proud of that, and then let's get back to work. Thank you all very much.